Okay, so let's jump straight into it. You'll be able to see down the bottom of our screen that we've got a bit of a progress bar, so you can see what section we're up to. We're starting off with some tips. We'll get into the creative writing section, analytical writing, and then a bit of a summary at the end. And if anyone has questions along the way, feel free to ask. Okay, so first of all, writing like a real person. Some of these tips that we have might sound a little bit straightforward, but it's amazing how often people can get them wrong. And writing like a real person is something that you should really keep in mind with all types of genres. So it's easy to slip into that habit of using really complex, winding sentences, using a thesaurus to find all the different words that you can possibly think of to make you sound really clever. But sometimes that doesn't actually really work. It has the opposite effect of just making us sound a little bit odd, and making it a bit unclear with what we actually mean. So we've got an example here of a don't and a do. So in reading this, we can really see this is a bit of a essay kind of example. We can really see how it's different and how it's much clearer when you just get to the point. So in writing his 1945 novella, Animal Farm, George Orwell audaciously constructed an allegorical fable which shrewdly celebrates the Soviet Union's ascension to power. So we've got lots of complicated words there. Some of them we might not even know how to say properly. We don't necessarily know what they all mean. So an alternative is to just get straight to it without the sort of adjective kind of words that sometimes we like to add in. So George Orwell's 1945 novella Animal Farm is an effective fable which allegorically reflects on the rise of the Soviet Union. So you can see that not only is that clearer, but it's also shorter. So a problem that I always had at school was your word limits. I'm sure lots of you find that's a problem too. So writing in a way that's just clear, to the point, those sorts of things, it's going to make your point clearer, it's going to help you with your word count, and it's going to set you up for beyond school as well, where writing with clarity is something that's just far more valuable than using lots of different big words. So writing like a real person is something you should take on board for all of your writing, inside and outside of English. Reading before you write. Now, I know that this can be a pain for people who don't want to read the book or the script or whatever it may be, but this is something you shouldn't underestimate the importance of. So also reading just the task itself as well. So reading and understanding the task before you try and attempt it. And it may sound straightforward, but lots of people, this is their downfall. So also to complement that, asking your teacher for clarification. There's no point trying to do something if you don't actually know what you're doing and just stumbling along. So asking your teacher if you don't know what the different parts of the task may be asking you to do. When you're given a task sheet, read through it carefully and then highlight any points as well. Because some people go and do a task and maybe they're writing an essay or answering a question and they just totally lose sight of the question that they're actually answering. And they sort of have forgotten the whole point of what they're doing. So highlighting those key areas makes sure that you know what the task is, what the marker is looking for, and exactly what you need to be writing about to meet those requirements. Also, writing out important instructions in your own words. So when you're just reading through those things, like I just mentioned, you can sort of translate it into words that you understand better. This is particularly helpful if your teacher's going to go through the task in detail, which they often do. And if they're going to do that, then sometimes they come up with some really helpful things that they say that make something clearer, that give you an idea or a hint. Writing those things down, just scribbling them in the margins on your piece of paper that you've got or on your device, they can be real gems for later on when you're actually doing the task. So reading the task, understanding the task, asking questions, and using your highlighting and your annotations as well. And then, of course, what I mentioned before, reading the whole script or the whole text if there is one. So it's even best to read it more than once. So for an essay or any kind of task where you need to base something on a original text, it's much more valuable to read the whole thing rather than researching to find summaries or reading the blurb or watching the movie version. So that is something that I cannot recommend enough. Some more tips, going with the flow. So making sure that things connect is really something that contributes to clarity. So if we think of an essay, you have a thesis, and a thesis is just your argument. It is what your take on the question. So if it's asking you, what extent do you agree with this particular statement, your thesis is saying, this is what I think. You're not using first person, but you can think of it as that. You can think this is you stating your position on the question or the prompt. And then as a result of that, all of your arguments are, all of your points, all of your 3 body paragraphs are the arguments that are supporting your position on the topic. And that's why they need to be connected. They need to flow together because it's you building, it's you constructing that argument that's all working together to support a broader argument. Your thesis is your umbrella, and your points are coming underneath that to support it. So thinking about connecting your ideas, having linking sentences, those sorts of things, that's why those things are important. Topic sentences as well, they need to clearly say what each paragraph will be about, and that will help with flow too. Giving yourself time to improve. So you want to have a reasonable amount of time to have a drafting and redrafting process. When you have the option of having a draft that you can get teacher feedback on, that is incredibly valuable in every subject. So the way I approached it at school was that I just treated the draft due date as the final due date. I know that that's easier said than done because you obviously have lots of things to juggle when you're at school, but making it so you are doing the absolute best you can for your draft means that your teacher can give you feedback on something that you genuinely are proud of, that genuinely reflects your knowledge, your skills, and you can get feedback on that. And if you just hand in a few sentences, if you don't hand in anything, if you hand in something that's not reflective of what you can really do, then you're just going to get feedback that perhaps you already would have expected. It's not really going to be targeted at ways that you as a student can improve in English. So treating that draft as something that's really serious can set you up for really good feedback that can help you refine your piece as much as possible. And if you're doing an exam, practice writing the full essays before you actually try and do the task in the real exam. So full essays and also dot point essays you may have heard of. Dot point essays can help with making sure you have that sort of structure down pat, but they can obviously be quicker if you're time poor. Writing the full essays and either marking them yourself, really analyzing how you've done, or even approaching your teacher to see if they're willing to have a look at it, can help you pick up on mistakes, fix things, understand what you need to work on. Oftentimes it's when we start writing something that we realize the things that we just don't understand. And so if we don't have a go at writing things in full, then we don't realize those things until perhaps it's too late. So, for example, if you just focus in your practicing writing thesis statements or topic sentences or introductions, and you never even have a go at maybe a conclusion or linking sentences, then you're going to find going into the exam that you just have no idea what you're doing. So the full essay, the full picture is something that you should be aiming to do, and also doing that in exam conditions. I suggest starting off if you're uncomfortable with the genre that you're writing. So if we keep talking in the essay genre, if you're not really sure about how to write that effectively and all the components that go into it, and even the topic itself that you'll be writing the essay on, focus to start with on just honing those skills. So give yourself plenty of time to do your drafts. Don't worry about exam conditions. Get a good understanding of all of those components and of the text that you need to read. And then once you've refined those skills and that understanding, you can then do practices that are actually in exam conditions and will reflect the time pressure you'll have, and the sort of the situation itself. So obviously, as I said before, you don't have a lot of time when you're juggling all of your different subjects and all of your other commitments, but it will pay off if you do give enough time to practicing these different things and having drafts as well. Now, I want to take a little bit of a detour into the syllabus. So I didn't take enough advantage, I think, of the syllabus in Year 12. So I suggest that you use this to your advantage in multiple different ways. So it covers all of the different aspects of the different tasks that you have to do in Year 11 and Year 12. So it'll give you just the basics, like the amount of time you'll have, the word count requirements, and then it'll go into all the nitty-gritty details with marking rubrics and those sorts of things that you need to understand. The thing about marking rubrics is often they use different language that we don't really understand, and we'll often find ourselves asking, what does that actually mean? And how can I actually do that in practice? So using the glossary to look up those unfamiliar words is something that I recommend. And we'll have a look at how that might look in just a second as well. Reading and unpacking what is relevant for your task. So the syllabus is really big. As I said, it covers all of those things. So go through and look at what is relevant to you. So the there's lots of labels that are going to show you exactly where you're at. Go to where that is and see what it says. And you can also look ahead if you do want to give yourself all of that time to practice your skills. You can look ahead to see what's coming and prepare even more in advance. So, taking a bit of a deep dive into the syllabus, an example that I wanted to give was a few things that I know students struggle with in terms of just understanding what they mean. So, one of those major ones is cultural assumptions. So, it does define cultural assumptions in the syllabus, and I've got the definition right here. So, ideas, beliefs, or attitudes about things like gender, religion, ethnicity, youth, age, disability, etc. So, those things that are taken for granted as being part of the fabric of the social practices of a particular culture. So, you're thinking, so in year 12 and in English in general, you'll be asked to sometimes create cultural assumptions. So perhaps you're writing a short story and you need to create your own cultural assumptions in the sort of culture that you're building in the story. And sometimes you need to just analyze existing cultural assumptions that might be in a text of some sort that you're analyzing. So if it's the latter and you're analyzing, then the first thing you should be asking yourself is, what culture is this? So if it's the Elizabethan era in England in one of the Shakespeare texts, then you're thinking, what is the culture? What do they believe back then? All of those different things related to that list we have there: gender, religion, ethnicity, those sorts of things. So, how they treated women, what sort of religion they were, all of those different things you can consider. And then perhaps if you're looking at another example, like To Kill a Mockingbird in 1930s America, Southern America, then they had lots of different beliefs that are very different to us today about race and ethnicity. And so analyzing those things in light of the culture where it's actually set, that is what you're thinking about. So it sounds a bit scary when they say cultural assumptions, and we sort of just think, oh, what on earth is that? But I'm sure you all understand what an assumption is, what a belief or a value is. And so it's just all of those things in relation to that list we have of gender, religion, etc., in the setting of that particular culture. So that's when you're analyzing, and when you're creating, you have free reign to create your own. So you may be given some instructions in terms of the sort of genre or the sort of setting that you have to conform to, but you are giving your characters and your story all of these aspects. So, for example, youth, maybe it's something about how certain people are treated when they're young. Maybe it's sort of an age discrimination type thing that you're looking at in your story. Maybe someone is struggling um, with gender and that kind of thing as they're sort of discovering those sorts of things. So just thinking about how you can use all of those things to construct your story. And then values as well. We have cultural attitudes, values, beliefs, those sorts of things are all part of your syllabus with all of your different criteria. So, again, moral principles or standards that are shared in a cultural group, and it all depends on that idea of the cultural group. If you're analyzing, you need to think, what is the culture? And if you're creating, you need to think, what culture do I want to create? And then a couple of other examples. You've got stylistic devices and cohesive devices. They also provide the helpful definitions there. So whenever you see in your rubric these words and you wonder what is a cohesive device, then you can read this and you can understand that even just if you're writing a short story and you have an ellipsis, which is a ... that is a cohesive device. A connective, you can have things like however and because and things like that, things that connect ideas. So it's not just a whole bunch of really tiny sentences with no sort of connecting points between them. And we all know what synonyms are with our thesaurus.com. That was a good friend of mine in school. So those are cohesive devices. So those definitions in the syllabus are something that I recommend you go through, and they can really make the marking rubric a lot more meaningful for you. And that can then, of course, help you tailor what you're doing in your task to meet those requirements a lot more effectively. Talking to yourself. So what do we mean by that? So we've got two different parts to this. One of them is just reflection. So just repeating the same method over and over again that may not work particularly well is not going to help you get a different or better outcome next time. So reflect on your experiences, your results, your feedback from grade 11 and before that as well, and throughout what you've completed so far of year 12, and then pinpoint what you need to work on. Not only that, but also your strengths as well. So you can keep repeating those strengths and maintain that, and you can work on the things that perhaps you find a little bit more tricky. So within that, make sure you really understand the feedback. I know that when it gets to the end of a term, you get your result back. It can be like, it's done, it's over, I'll never have to write a persuasive speech again. The thing about that kind of attitude is it might mean that you don't fully understand feedback that you've received, and that means that you may not be able to really use that to your advantage to ensure that you do well in future in those areas. As I've mentioned already, there are things that carry over between each different genre of writing in English in terms of the rubric that you're marked against. So just because you may have now finished your persuasive speech doesn't mean that the feedback that you received for that task isn't going to be helpful, because you would have had, as I said, cultural assumptions, attitudes, values, beliefs, cohesive devices, all of those things, they're common throughout all of your assessment pieces in English. So if your teacher told you that you didn't do those things so effectively, then you really need to know that. So next time when you're writing your short story or you're writing your essay, you can actually improve on that and you can understand what you did wrong and how to address that. So making sure that you actually follow up on your feedback with your teacher, that you fully understand it, that is something that you should do at school and beyond as well in English and your other subjects too. The second part of this talking to yourself idea is the vocal editing. So sometimes we write things and they just make no sense, but it's hard to pick up on that when we're just quickly reading in our head, and we sort of know what we meant, but even though we know what we meant, we didn't really get it down in the right way. Reading it out loud is going to force your brain to process that information in a different way. So you're going to pick up on the mistakes that you might have missed. You're going to realize how out of breath you are trying to read something that is a 60-word sentence, and you're like, oh, I need to fix that. So it helps you, I guess, put yourself in someone else's shoes as well, because you can hear the way it sounds to someone else. Even just getting someone to read it to you can actually be helpful as well. The way that they sound, the way that they may stumble, those sorts of things can really give you an indication of the things that you could work on to improve clarity and just readability. Nourishing your mind. So reading and writing often is something that is going to give you a real advantage in terms of English and just your writing skills in general. So if you read 15 minutes a day of something that's of pretty good quality, of different types of writing as well, I'm not saying that you have to go and read example essays or something. You could read just novels that you actually enjoy reading. You could read poetry. You could read the online news. You can read the examples on the QCEE website. Those sorts of just reading activities that can help you understand the difference between good and bad writing, help you understand grammar and vocabulary. If we think about synonyms and things like that, reading often can expose you to all sorts of different vocabulary that's going to help you have this way broader base of vocabulary just in your mind. So when you don't have access to things like thesaurus.com, when you're in exam conditions or something like that, then you're going to far more easily be able to come up with different words. So so your whole essay isn't just the same things over and over again. And then as a result of all of that, it's just going to make it easier to tackle writing tasks in general. You're going to understand how to write to entertain, to engage, to persuade, to be analytical, all of those sorts of things. So reading and writing often. And to sum up all of that, you don't need to enjoy English to be good at it, but it really helps. I know that you can't just flick a switch and decide you're going to love English, but I suppose the thing that you can do is try and think about the real world applicability of some of the things you're doing. It can be tricky when you're looking at Shakespeare or or something like that that you feel has no relevance to the real world and what you'll potentially be doing in future. But I guess think about more of the underlying things that maybe you're learning. How to analyze is something that I'll have to do as part of my career, and lots of people have to do as part of their career in different ways. So, thinking about how the skills that you're learning can actually be helpful is a way to perhaps appreciate it a little bit more and be a little bit more motivated to try your best. Using all of the resources around you, I've spoken about teachers and the syllabus. The QCEE, of course, as well as the syllabus, they also have the example responses on their websites, and example sort of task sheets as well. So check those out if you haven't done so already. They can give you a hint about what's to come, or help you understand a task that you've already been given that you might be struggling with. And teachers are there to help you, so make sure you understand the feedback that they give you. Make sure you seek feedback, and make sure you ask questions whenever you aren't sure about something. There's no point doing something wrong just because you were uncomfortable asking in the first place.